off all these siege tanks now. Those drones really desperately trying to run for their lives. There's Wednesday Night
vVv gaming.
Yeah, we'll see whether both players, again, this is a map where that single gate or single racks expansion can be quite powerful. And again, that's become sort of the norm in this matchup as players are favoring more and more macro games, 2 and 3 base play. They try to get down that fast expansion as quickly as possible. And you sort of make a deal with the other player, sort of an unspoken deal. I see you're fast expanding, so I'll just fast expand. And you basically both agree that you're going to play a 2 base at the very minimum. We hardly ever see players really take advantage of fast expands with aggressive plays, so I'll be interested if binskiLight goes for another fast expand, if Hasuu tries to put some sort of pressure on him with a robo play.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a full cross-spawn map, and the walking distances are rather long, but Immortals would be the perfect unit to add in order to try to go for that bunker bust. That 50 damage every a little bit more than a second does really add up really quickly, especially when you can have force fields from sentries preventing any repair. And now we see Hasuu, after placing down that pylon, scouting in the clockwise direction. It will be a little bit of time before he finds his opponent, but he may get there early enough to perhaps scout out the barracks just as it's being completed and perhaps see if there is any gas in play.
Yeah, we talk about aggressive builds for Protoss to try to bust the front door, but there's also aggressive builds that Terran can use as well. If you go for some sort of 2 racks play, it can be very powerful against that Nexus first. You can actually take down the Nexus. The Protoss almost forced to finish it at that point, just to allow some tanking of damage. The Nexus is pretty decent at that. Often has to pull probes. You can do a lot of economic damage. If you go for multiple racks, sometimes you can proxy a racks and really try to hide what you're doing. So either player really able to go for aggression to try to counter that 1 racks or 1 gate expand that we so often see.
Yes, the probe now from Hasuu coming inside the base, it will spot the barracks right as it's being completed and spot that there is no gas coming in. So binskiLight pretty much opening up with the same build that he did on Shakura's Plateau. Expect him to train up a Marine in order to shoo away this probe and then perhaps go for that engineering bay block once more. The engineering bay block did, mess with Rocker just a little bit, as we now see a probe making his way over to the natural expansion, and it looks like it's going to be a Nexus before a Cybernetics core, which is something that I rarely see now. 1 gateway, and he's even delaying his Zealot.
Yeah, that's an interesting decision, but I think that's the right decision. Hasuu pulls guys off gas. He's only got 2 on gas at the moment, and he goes for that very, very fast Nexus. He might have been watching the last game where he saw the engineering bay block, and he says, you know what, I want to get down this Nexus. I know he only has 1 racks. I can delay my Stalker, my tech a little bit, and make sure that I don't risk losing to that engineering bay block like Rocker did in the last game.
Yeah, right now Hasuu needs to get some units out, though. He needs to scout out and see what's happening outside his Nexus. That Nexus, as it's warping in, gives you very minimal sight, and for all he knows, there could be bunkers being built right next to that Nexus and Marines trekking along. So you can see that the Zealot is already straight rallied over to the natural expansion, as we now see the warp gate tech has been started. The SCV going to perhaps eat a little bit of time from that Zealot. He's not going to be able to scout out anytime quickly, as a Stalker now being chrono boosted out as well.
Yeah, and I think binskiLight, if he came with maybe a proxy racks or 2 racks, would have been a perfect counter to this, especially with that Cybernetics core delayed. He would have maybe 3 or 4 Marines and more streaming across the field at this point, and he could maybe even get up a bunker like you were talking about. But again, both players sort of making the agreement, the silent agreement, that we're going to macro up, we're going to allow each other to get up their expansion, and then we're going to go from there.
Yeah, currently Hasuu not training any probes. A little bit of a strange situation right now. I'm not quite sure if he's purposely getting into his 4th gateway and then going to start training probes, as he wants to make sure he doesn't fall behind the triple racks production of binskiLight. binskiLight doesn't have any add-ons though, so the warp gate tech will definitely help him, will help Hasuu get out more units much more quickly, as reactors and tech labs not going to be added in anytime soon.
Yeah, it looks like we actually do have the first tech lab coming from binskiLight. And again, that 3 racks isn't very scary against just gateway units, as long as you have sort of similar numbers of gates, because Marines, not so good against Zealots and Stalkers alone, but once you start adding Marauders, you start adding upgrades like Stim, which we see Binsky adding now, that's when the sort of balance of power shifts a little bit back to the barracks instead of the gateway, until the Protoss gets some higher tech themselves or some upgrades.
Yes, most definitely. Right now, we're seeing the warp gate tech has been completed. All those gateways now changing into warp gates as we are now going into a double forge. So double forge coming in from Hasuu most likely is going to be level 1 weapons and armor upgrades, as we may also see a Twilight Council if Hasuu really wants to heavily try to tech up and get those weapons upgrades. Now, the Stalkers and the Zealots and the Sentries, I'm a little curious as to why he's not taking on the rocks. Never mind, Hasuu now making his way down to the south, taking down the rocks in order to set up another nexus. He wants to establish his third base well before the Terran and try to get up a stronger economy, and then be able to just push out with stronger tech units as you now see a scanner sweep come in from Binsky.
Yep, I'm a little concerned about the lack of scouting here from Hasso. Yes, he has the center towers, but he hasn't poked and seen what Binsky is really going for at this point. So he doesn't know if any sort of timings are coming, and when you basically don't go for the robotics play, when you forego it to go for these early upgrades, it's really tough to scout. You sometimes maybe even have to get hallucination for your first few centuries and try to use that to scout a little bit, but Hasu is completely blind at this point, does not know what to add in the way of tech. He's just sort of blindly going for these upgrades. As you mentioned, he could go for the Twilight Council, go for a heavy gateway style. He is adding his third and fourth gas, so could be going for that maybe that Archon gateway mix that we see in the late game.
Yeah, but at the same time, Binsky, besides those scanner sweeps, I don't think he's actually seen that much actual tech. He's only seen a gateway and a cybernetics core. He doesn't see the double forge. He doesn't know about the double weapons upgrade, and he doesn't know about the Twilight Council that is currently being warped in as well. So Hasu, as long as he gets charge and then perhaps 2 armor on those zealots, will be able to tank a lot of the damage that those Marines are trying to deal.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to where these two engage as well. If you engage on these ramps in these small choke points around the third of both players, that's when the Zealots can get a decent surround, but you can also use force fields to prevent that kiting. If you engage in the center, it can be very tough to get effective force fields. The Terran player can basically kite to its heart's content, and that's when this upgrade strategy doesn't cut it so well. You really need the ranged AoE, the storms, or the Colossi to do damage against the Marines and Marauders.
Yeah, we now see the Marines and the Marauders with the medevacs making a move out. They are going to be activating the Zelnaga Tower and then just continuing along their merry way. And they are going to come within sight of this far Zelnaga Tower here. It looks like Hasu is not going to be pulling away with this probe, or he does just going to lose this probe off in this location as the command center being built at the 12 o'clock third base location.
Yeah, we'll see whether Binsky is actually going to engage and commit to an engagement here, or whether he's just trying to, rustle the feathers of Hasu a little bit. Looks like he's going to be checking for the third as he's setting up his own third. So Hasu has a patrolling zealot down here to sort of detect any early detection of aggression in the south position here. And it looks like Binsky's going to be waiting for this third medevac and now loading up some medevacs. And it looks like, 3 medevacs being loaded up here. So going to have quite a powerful drop, but this Zealot might spot it.
Yeah, the Zealot now moving up and down. It's really going to come down to where that Zealot is as those medevacs fly by. The medevacs now all grouping up to the far south side. And unless Hasu is keeping track of the minimap ever so carefully, he's not going to see these medevacs fly by, as the Marines and the Marauders are now feigning pressure on the front door.
Yeah, and it looks like that Zealot, he is going to spot the medevac down there. I saw Hasu's army, or his vision, and he does see that, so he's moving some units to the third, but I think he actually thinks those medevacs are heading for the third, when in fact they're heading for the main. He does have some stalkers in position. They do have blinks. They can immediately get into position, focusing down the medevacs, take down a half-full medevac, but the stim on the Marines and Marauders, just so many here, coming out of those 3 medevacs, cleaning up all these stalkers. At the same time, we've got a drop in the natural doing a lot of economic damage as well. So Hasu trying to defend on multiple fronts.
Yeah, Hasuu fighting in the main, fighting on the Nasrul. The Stalkers are not able to really engage it. The Marines are upgraded 1-1. Stalkers are upgraded 1-1 as well, as the Marines are now going after low hit point Stalkers, able to take them down. And now Marines just shooting straight from the low ground up onto the high ground, as the Marauders are able to just destroy that assimilator, and the Stalkers and the Zealots unable to really engage as they are fighting on different levels.
Yeah, it's all Zealots, and they do not have charge yet. And Binsky being very smart here, using the terrain to his advantage, picking up away from those Zealots, and then trying to kite and drop in the natural once again. Hasuu has lost so many probes, go to 31, 32, 33 probes have gone down now. It is 59 to 21, and I think Binsky, with his multiple drop aggression on basically dropping almost 2 or 3 different places at once and really microing these drops well, has probably won this game.
Yeah, right now there's just a really, really large hill for Hasuu to climb back if he wants to take the victory. We do see a Templar Archives now being placed down. Psystorm would have been good on those drops if the High Templars had the energy and the Psystorm upgrade, but it's going to be almost feel a little bit too little too late, as Hasuu now more than half of the workers behind his opponent. He's also down a base, as he does not have a third base up. And now it's going to be the 3 full bases of Binsky versus the 2 bases with minimal probes for Hasuu.
Yeah, and Binsky just finishing his Ghost Academy, so if I'm Binsky at this point, I'm coming out with maybe 3 or 4 Ghosts, and then I'm pushing all in with whatever I have, and it looks like he's going to go even a little bit earlier than that. He's moving his 152 supply army across the field here, and he's going to be met by only an 89 supply army from Hasuu. He does not have storms yet. He's just got the 1 Archon. He does have charge, and he does have 2-2, but Binsky has 1-1, and he's got the medevac, so I think that this is going to spell the end for Hasuu.
Yeah, Binsky now down to 173. A Zealot tries to run by, gets shot by the Marines and the Marauders. Binsky most likely is going to be going for another multi-pronged hit. Perhaps Stalkers could be in midfield, and now it looks like there's going to be a drop in the main base once more, as we saw those 2 medevacs earlier, and now a really, really large push with the main army, as well as Hasuu loses a pylon.
Yeah, loses a pylon, gets supply block, and now he's not able to warp in anywhere to defend against these drops. So he's going to have to defend in the main, and he's moving his entire army for the most part into that main. And now in the natural, he's going to be met by the bulk of the army of Binsky, and it's 186 to 88 at this point. So yeah, double the supply, and unless Binsky throws away this entire army and loses his third or his natural, I think he's got this one in the bag.
Yeah, Binsky, however, being very, very safe and careful. He doesn't want to engage against those High Templars unless he knows that he can really win. 1 High Templar getting taken out there. Marines and Marauders shooting from the low ground up onto the high ground. Stalkers now making their way over. But that assimilator just destroyed. No more gas for Hasuu, as Hasuu does need a lot of that gas, as the Stalkers and the High Templars are now making a push out. A rather strange push, as he does have a much inferior army, but if he can get those Psystorms off in the right locations, perhaps take down a couple medevacs while they are fully loaded, he may be able to come out ahead.
Yeah, those medevacs have a lot of HP, so you might actually be able to just one-shot those with some feedback. So it'll be interesting to see here what he chooses to do. He has probed up, well, not much at all. He's got 29 to 66. He's producing probes a little bit at a time, but really struggling to try to max out this army. And Binsky just posturing here, dropping again in the main as he postures in midfield as well. And Binsky just being surgical with these drops, picking apart Hasuu.
Yeah, so far, Hasuu has not gotten any anti-air to stop it. We see a feedback onto the medevac, and now a Psystorm coming in. The Marauders will all get taken down, as we now have an attack on the front door. The Marines and the Marauders are trying to run through here. There's another Psystorm, and Binsky actually losing a lot of units, or taking a lot of damage in this engagement. But are there any more High Templars are the key questions, as the Zealots are now trying to chase. It looks like more feedback once again being cast, as another Archon being merged on the field.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Binsky almost toying with Hasuu. He's got basically two-thirds of his army back into his main. He does have ghosts at this point, and he's got a lot of them. 8 ghosts. They all have about 150 energy. Maybe he's waiting for a 3-3 to finally push in and finish him off, but he's going to have just a ton of ghosts in this army for the next engagement. Once again, Hasuu is supply blocked, 94 to 195, so Binsky establishing his 4th, and now pushing this large train of units with ghosts and a few SCVs, in fact, across the field, perhaps for the killing blow.
Yeah, I think the SCVs are actually being transferred to the fourth base as there are hardly any SCVs off over there. As the Ghosts and the Marines are now making their way out, they are going to be 3-3 or should be very close to 3-3 by the engagement. By the time the engagement does happen, Hasuu is establishing up his third base, but he is finishing his third base as we now see LighT establishing his fifth and his sixth base at the same time. This is not good news as we now have an engagement in the center.
Yeah, few AMP is going off, getting all the energy from this High Templar. They've gotten a lot of shields of the Zealots as well. Some great positioning on by Binsky. He had his Marauders in the front, Marines in the back. That's the perfect for tanking those charge lots. They don't do a lot of damage to those Marauders, especially as you kite. And now Hasuu gonna have to get the GG, loses his entire army, and is about to lose his natural. There it is, there's the GG. And Binsky puts LighT eSports up 3-1.
Yeah, so Binsky up 3-1 in this best of 7 series, but then again, the final player is gonna be Ruff, and Ruff, he is gonna have a difficult time going through the rest of these LighT players, as we'll see whether or not Ruff's crazy style will be able to put him up ahead.